Hello, friends. Welcome to season 2 of the Broken Open podcast. I'm Maureen Towns, author, speaker, and expert on finding calm amidst the chaos of helping those you love with mental health and addictions issues. If you like what you hear on this podcast, please be sure to subscribe so that you're the first to know when new episodes are released. And visit MaureenTowns.com to get in touch to stay current on our programs, as well as any updates on the book Broken Open. Enjoy the show. Hi, John. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm great. As I just said to you, I'm going to mix it up a little bit. And instead of doing this the way I usually do it, I'm going to let you introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your story, if that's okay.
Yeah, not a problem at all, Maureen. So thanks very much for having me on as a guest, and it was a pleasure talking to you on my podcast a few weeks ago. So I'm originally from Manchester in the UK, the United Kingdom, and yeah, I grew up in an alcoholic household. So my dad was a heavy drinker. Later kind of realized that he'd crossed the line into alcoholism. And when I think I was about 11 years old, he hit his rock bottom and went to his first AA meeting.
Mm.
And I suppose that was the first time I'd ever heard of Alcoholics Anonymous, because I came home one evening and my dad was in bed, and he'd basically been ill for the last kind of few days, and he'd locked us out of the house and stuff. It was kind of like a series of events had kind of led to, this final event. And he was sat up in bed, and I went into the bedroom to speak to him, and he just asked me to sit down, and he just said, I'm not going to drink anymore. I'm going to AA meetings. I'm going to go to an AA meeting. And that didn't mean anything to me at all at the time. And in fact, the only thing that changed really was that in the evenings he wasn't there because he was going to AA meetings. Usually he'd have been working quite late, and then he'd have been drinking. So he'd come home, and usually he'd be drunk by the time he got home. And so now it was, he was going to these meetings instead. And I kind of remember thinking to myself, I don't know whether this was early on in his recovery or if it was a bit later, further down the line, but he had a plaque next to his bed, and it was the Serenity Prayer on this plaque. And I just remember thinking to myself, oh God, he's gone religious, and, and I wasn't, I didn't grow up in a religious household. There was all like both. One of my grandparents was a Catholic, and one of my grandparents was a Protestant. So I'd get taken to kind of these different kind of church events and stuff every now and then, and it always really intrigued me. Actually, kind of, I think the kind of the mysticism and the spirituality of churches appealed to me, but I certainly wasn't religious. And I grew up to kind of in my late teens, early 20s, and mid 20s. I think I was heading more towards atheism. I was kind of agnostic, but um, I kind of believed in something. I've always been a bit of a seeker. I'd say I was an agnostic, actually, not an atheist, because I'd always been a seeker, and that was to play a massive part in my recovery, which I'll get onto in a minute. So, funnily enough, I started drinking at pretty much the point that my dad stopped drinking.
Mm.
I think I had my first drink around the age of 12, 13, usual kind of scenario, hanging around on the fields with my friends. And there was these drinks in the UK called hooch. It was like like an alcohol pop, they call it, like an orange, alcohol drink. And I remember taking a few of those drinks and quite liking it. It didn't really do that much for me, and I think I was a little bit scared of alcohol, actually, because of what had happened to my dad. So I think I had it in the back of my mind already that, to stay away from it. And plus, I was a very, very keen footballer. So I used to play football, all hours of the day. And is my phone going off now? Oh, sorry. I'm just going to
That's
switch
okay.
this. That's very unprofessional of me.
Yeah. No worries. No
Usually,
worries.
usually switch it off, but sorry about
That's
that.
okay.
So, yeah, very keen footballer, and I kind of knew what had become of certain alcoholic athletes who had ruined their careers, and I just wanted to be a professional footballer. So I didn't drink from then until the age of 17, and ironically I was at an awards ceremony for football, and we'd had a really good season, and I'd done really really well, and I was getting some awards, but I'd broken my leg playing football, and I was on crutches, had my leg in plaster, and I received these awards, and I just remember somebody coming over to me and putting a pint of beer down in front of me and saying, "Congratulations, this is for you." And I said, "I don't drink," and they said, "You can have one." And in hindsight, that
That's
one
wicked.
drink, yeah, that one drink was, it took me to the races. From that point onwards, that was alcohol became my new obsession, really. And I think it happened quite quickly, really, because I went from the age of 17, football was my life, to within a couple of years, alcohol was my life. Going
Mm.
out and drinking and partying, and football began to take a back seat. Um, I remember really embarrassing my parents one morning because I was sick on the sidelines. I was halfway through this football
Mm.
game, and I was like sick on the sidelines because I was out the night before until like 3 or 4 in the morning, and that ended my football career basically. And then
Mm.
I moved from Manchester to Leeds, which is just over the Pennines, and it was kind of like it felt as though the shackles were off, if
Mm.
I'm honest, because I lived in a household now where my mum rarely drank, my dad didn't drink, so anytime I came home drunk, I would have to try and hide it,
Yeah.
and I yeah, I just suppose I just went off the rails, really. I remember thinking to myself before I left home, actually, that I'm going to do everything that I want to do. Like I'm going to do whatever I want to do, and that was the mindset that I went there with. So it's no wonder I did exactly that. And
Mm-hmm.
I think I drank every single night throughout the whole of my degree.
Mm.
I don't think I didn't actually go out many nights. Like I was out actually partying in the pub, in the clubs, drinking more or less every night. And along with that came a lot of drugs as well. I was because my football career had ended. I got into DJing, so I got my first set of decks at the age of 17 and taught myself to mix. And then I actually entered a DJ competition in my first year of uni, and I won this competition,
Mm.
which meant that I had 2 residencies at 2 clubs, one in Leeds and one in Bradford. And that was it. I was hooked. I was like, I was working in a record shop. I
Mm.
was whilst I was at uni, I was just partying every night, and ecstasy. Well, the the first time I ever took ecstasy was in a nightclub called Space in Leeds, and it was on a Wednesday night. The night was called Base at Space, and it was this. We went there religiously every Wednesday, and I remember taking this ecstasy, and I was just. It was the greatest feeling that I'd ever had in my life, and I just
Mm.
thought, I think I stood next to the speaker for about 5 hours, just stood there, just like feeling this music and
Yeah.
hugging people and loving people, and it was just it was amazing. It was as though like everything that I'd ever been felt like I was missing, I got from that drug. So
Yeah.
I made the decision to take it as often as I possibly could,
Got it.
and I think that coupled with quite a lot of cocaine, a little bit of ketamine here and there, just on the party scene, it meant that I actually drank for longer, because I think if I'd have just been drinking on its own, I would have hit a rock bottom very, very, very fast. I mean, I was blacking out from the age of 18, well, from
Mm-hmm.
from the first drink, really, I was blacking out. So the drugs were enabling me to carry on for longer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it balances it out. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. You're taking a downer and an upper.
Yeah. Yeah,
Makes
exactly.
it longer. Yeah, yeah.
Makes
That's
it longer.
wild.
So and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. Like, there's, I had the best time. I mean, I won't say I had the best time of my life, because now is the best time of my life. I did a podcast with somebody, and he kind of he pointed that out, and I was like, yeah, actually, you're right. This is the best time of my life. But I look back on those memories like really, really fondly. Like the camaraderie of it all, and the just the madness, the chaos,
Yeah.
and the love as well. There was a lot of love. Like, it was, the point was, we were going out and we were forgetting all our worries, and we were dancing all night long, and we were just having fun, and it was amazing. But unfortunately, like, as the years went by, we left uni, and then in the year after we left uni, everybody kind of started getting jobs. People were kind of settling down a little bit. I was still working in the record shop, still DJing, and still taking loads of drugs. And basically, it came to a head where my friendship group, who one of which was my girlfriend, like at university, they had to do like an intervention, because I was just sat there one day, and I was like, my hood up, in the corner, and remember them coming over to me and kind of saying like, what's going on? Like, you're taking too many drugs. You need to stop taking drugs. So I started to calm that down a little bit, but still sneaking it, still doing it whenever I could, and without going into too much detail about all the different, because I mean, you could talk about this forever, but basically, I was lying to everybody. I
Mm-hmm.
was cheating on my girlfriend all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I was driving when I was off my face on drugs, carrying drugs quite a lot. So obviously, like, from a criminality point of view, I was like quite high risk, really, and just not really engaged in my life, other than this kind of like nightlife that I was kind of constantly chasing fame as well, because I wanted to make something, make a name for myself, and be someone. And I think where it all changed was I met. I mean, I went from a long term girlfriend at university to another girl who was a local Leeds girl. We were together, I think, for a year, maybe two. Can't really remember the timescales, but I moved from this one relationship to another, and then I met the woman who was to become my first wife. I was on holiday with my girlfriend, and we were kind of like in the process of splitting up. And I met this girl, and she happened to be the younger sister of a friend of mine. And well, in one of the books I wrote, I think it was Anonymous God. I talked about, she was like my angel. She just saved me, basically, because she was like a real good girl. She drank a little bit, but she didn't do any drugs.
Mm-hmm.
She was just very, very sensible. She was 5 years younger than me, but just like a sensible person. And we got together, and she helped me to see, really, that my lifestyle wasn't quite as cool as I thought it was. And coupled with my parents' kind of intervention, it was kind of like, it's time to grow up now, John. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
It's time to grow up now. So, I mean, and again, I don't have any regrets, but I also look back on that time, and I can see now that I was on the cusp. I mean, all the people that I used to DJ with, because we were all what you would class as kind of like second-rate DJs, not the headliners. We were the ones that were like warming up for the headliners. And all the ones that have stuck with it have gone on to become the headliners. And that kind of hurt me, because I loved DJing, and I loved making music, and all I wanted was to be a DJ. So it kind of hurt me that other people had gone on to become what I wanted to be. But then at the same time, I do think that I could have ended up killing myself, if I'd have carried on that way. Like, I was getting close to, you know, a potential overdose, or potentially getting into harder drugs.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it could have happened where somebody could have offered me something, and normally I wouldn't take, crack or heroin or something.
Mm-hmm.
And usually I would never even think of taking that, but maybe I would have done, So I kind of think I got away quite light, really, in many respects. So I met this woman, and I just started to calm down, really, started to kind of take my day-to-day career a bit more seriously. I got a good job, and I was just trying to maintain this kind of like normal life, but in the background, the alcohol was always there.
Mm-hmm.
And as the drugs petered off, the alcohol started to increase.
Mm-hmm.
But I was drinking on my own, and I was drinking in isolation the majority of the time. Like I could go out with my friends and have a few beers,
Mm-hmm.
and it'd be okay. But then I'd go home and then I'd just drink, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And she saw my drinking, but nobody else did.
Mm-hmm.
So it eventually came to a head, really, when I think like probably, I don't know, 25, 26, something like that. We were on holiday, and my partner had had a conversation with my dad about my drinking. My dad had given me a copy of the Alcoholics Anonymous Big Book to have a read of it, and I'd taken it away on holiday. And I was sat on the beach and I was drinking, like I had a beer in one hand and I had a big book in the other hand, and I'm like flicking through this book, and I was reading excerpts of it to my partner, and she's going like, "Yeah, that's you. Yeah, that's you. Yeah, that's you." And I was like, "Yeah." And when I got to the Jekyll and Hyde character that it talks about, and I read that to her, and she said, "John, that is you to an absolute T." She said, "You're a lovely guy, but as soon as you've got a drink inside you, you're like a monster."
Uh-huh.
And those were the exact words that she said. And I was like, he's like, "Oh, a monster. That's not nice.
No.
That's
Yeah.
not nice words." And it really did stick with me, that. And but I came off that holiday and I gave the book back to my dad, and I was like, "Really good read, that, Dad. Really enjoyed it. I can see now what your alcoholism's all about." I I thought my dad was just trying to tell me about his alcoholism. Like I was in total denial at that point, total denial. But a seed had definitely been planted at that stage,
Yep.
and 2 years later, as the drinking had escalated and escalated and escalated, and it got to a point where I was blacking out left, right, and center. I was like, I woke up I was driving on the motorway one at 3 o'clock in the morning. I just woke up, like that kind of thing, and going out on a Friday night and not coming back until Sunday morning. Like my partner, I remember she stepped over me on the doorstep on a Sunday morning when she was going to work, and I was only going out for a few beers on the Friday night,
Mm-hmm.
and she gave me this look of total disappointment, and it was the same look that my mum had given me when I was quite young, when I first started drinking, and I'd had that look quite a few times, and that shame, it starts to mount up, and like that you're hurting people that you love, and you really, really don't want to, but you just can't stop yourself, and it's like, I genuinely mean it. I'm only going out for one beer. That's all I'm going out for. Maybe two beers. That's all I'm going out for. Maybe three at a push. But I'm not having any more than that. I'm
Yeah.
coming home now. And how do I end up on the doorstep on Sunday morning? And there was a photograph taken of that weekend and it was like at the after party on the Saturday or wherever whatever timeline wherever in the timeline, and somebody took a photograph of me. I don't remember the photograph being taken, but if you look at the photograph, you see that there's nobody home.
Mm.
The lights are just off, and I like to look at that photo every now and then just to remind myself of what happens when I take a drink, because that was just one drink and that's what it led to. So we came up with a plan, which was to leave the UK and to go and live in Australia, because obviously England was the problem,
Got it. Yeah.
my friends were the problem, my job was the problem,
Yeah.
and my partner said to me, like, we'll go out there indefinitely, and maybe we'll stay, and maybe we won't. We'll just see how it goes, and we'll go from there. Really, just get you away from here. So I was like, okay, cool. So we did that, and just before we left, my dad said to me, "Remember, son, that you take yourself with you wherever you go. You take your problems with you, sorry, wherever you go." And
Yes.
I was like, what do you mean by that? And you know, I just didn't know. I just
Yeah.
didn't know at that point. I didn't know that the problem was up here. I
Yeah.
thought that the problem was external of myself. So we got on the plane, and oh, sorry, no, we don't. I'm missing out the most vital part. So the night before we left, 2 nights before we left, sorry, because we stayed at my my girlfriend's sister's house, and then we stayed in a hotel the night after, and then we flew to Thailand, stayed a month in Thailand, and then went on to Australia. So the night before the hotel, we were having a meal and a leaving meal. There was me, my partner, her sister, and her boyfriend. And basically, I said, right, I'm going to go to the shop and get some drinks. And I bought 4 bottles of red wine and a load of beers. And I came back and they were like, what have you bought all that for? And I was like, well, we're having a meal, aren't we? We're having a drink. So I drank at least 2 of those bottles and probably a few beers as well. And by the end of the evening, they were playing cards on the table, and I was sat on the sofa on my own, with my headphones in, listening to music, and just basically isolating myself away from them, because I was wrecked by this point, and I just wanted to be on my own doing what I do. And this was what the thing was. That was how it had been for the last 2 years, every night.
Yeah.
But they didn't know that. My partner did, but they didn't know that. And my partner gave me that look again, the disappointed look.
Yeah.
And it was a bit of a despair, actually, I saw in her eyes, I think, as well. And that was the last thing that I remember. To this day, I cannot remember anything other than that, that look. So I wake up the next morning and I'm like, oh my God, I feel absolutely horrendous. And I just can't do this anymore. I just cannot do this anymore. And my partner wasn't in bed with me, so I kind of was like panicking a little bit, thinking, where's she? And like, what have I done? And like, what's happened? And I was panicking because I was like, I've had blackouts before, but I usually remember some bits, and I couldn't remember anything. Anyway, I walked towards the bathroom to freshen up, and I overheard my partner telling her sister that she was going to leave me if I didn't stop drinking, basically. And she was saying that, like the last time we went to Thailand, it was a nightmare. And I was like, I went to Thailand a few years previous, and I basically disappeared. Like I went into the jungle one day, and I just came back with a load of tattoos, and took her back to where I'd been to meet all the local people for a barbecue, because I was like the new like center of attention. And that's what I was like, everywhere I went, I was just like this just crazy bastard, basically. So and that's a long story in itself, but I won't go into that. But so I overheard her saying that, and that was essentially my rock bottom, really, because the one thing that I didn't want to happen was for our relationship to end and for me to be the cause of that. So I walked back into the bedroom, and this is where the whole religious spiritual thing comes in now. I hadn't ever prayed, apart from maybe to just ask for help every now and then, but I couldn't think of anything else to do other than I got down on my knees and I just said a very, very sincere prayer, which went something like, please help me. Please help me. Like, I can't do this anymore. Please help me. And when I stood up, my partner was walking into the room, and she said, what are you doing? And I just said, I'm not going to drink anymore. I said, I don't know. I don't know what happened last night, and I'm really sorry, but I'm not going to drink anymore. And she said, well, why is this time going to be any different? She said, you always say that. And I said, yeah, I know I do, but I really mean it this time. And she said, well, just don't drink in Thailand, and then we'll see how we go in Australia. So I was like, okay, fair enough. And as I'd stood up from that prayer, I just felt like this feeling of like something like dislodged around my heart. It was a strange feeling. It was like, I think it was like almost like a pressure valve had been released. I felt like a sense of relief. And that night in the hotel, in the airport hotel, I had the best night's sleep I've ever had in my life, ever. It was like, I heard many years later in a meeting somebody say, when you surrender, it's like the war's over, and all of a sudden you get the first glimpse of serenity. And that was what it was like. And slept like a baby, woke up the next day, and was in the airport, and it was just really weird. Like, I'd never really been interested in religion or spirituality at all. And all of a sudden I had this keen sense that I wanted to know about the world's religions. And that's the book that I picked up, this book by Hudson Smith called The World's Religions. And basically I read that from cover to cover on the flight to Thailand. And by the time I got to the other end, I realized, well, my interpretation was that all religions are like stories made up by humans to explain the mystery, and this is the problem, is that nobody knows what the mystery is. Like, nobody can get to it. So I was kind of like on this path then, I was on this kind of like seeking path. And this part of the story between kind of like when we arrived in Australia to when I eventually actually went into formal recovery is a very, very, very long story, because there's so many crazy things that happened, but I'll try and boil it down. So obviously this miracle had happened, which was I was a dependent alcoholic, a dependent drinker. In my mind, I had to have alcohol every day.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'd said this prayer, and then the next day I didn't want alcohol anymore. The obsession had completely gone. So I'd been in Thailand for a month, and I'd been surrounded by alcohol, and I hadn't even thought about picking up a drink. I hadn't even looked at a drink and thought, oh, I need that or I want that, which was just insane. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'd not had a drink for, apart from periods where I was trying to be abstinent and I was exercising and stuff. I mean, we're talking like 10 years worth of drinking, really.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew something had happened, but I didn't know what. And I kept picking up books. I'd go and buy a book about atheist spirituality or some other kind of spirituality. And I was just trying to figure out what was going on, basically. And my partner got a job in this shop. And the manager, the guy who owned the shop, he was a born again Christian. And I started talking to him about it. And I said, look, this is what's happened to me. What do you think? And he was kind of like, well, he told me this story about a friend of his who'd, his daughter had drowned in the swimming pool. He'd pulled her out of the swimming pool. He'd tried to bring her back to life, but she wouldn't come back to life. And then he said a prayer and asked for help. And then she came back to life, and he was converted, and he was like, maybe you just need to ask for help, like ask for a sign or something. So I walked home from her work, and I was looking up at the stars in the sky, and this beautiful starry night in Melbourne in Australia, and I just said out loud, I was like, okay, right, God, if you exist, I need a sign, and I need one like right now. So I went to bed that night, and prior to having that conversation with this man, I'd been in work the morning before, and I'd been searching on Facebook for an old childhood friend called Angela, who I hadn't seen her for 10 years, and we were born in the same hospital together. We had like a connection because we've grown up together and all that kind of stuff. So I've been searching for her, couldn't find her, had that conversation, asked for a sign, go in work the next day, switch on my computer, go on Facebook. There's a friend request waiting from her.
Mm.
And when I answered the friend request, turned out that she lived in Australia around the corner from me as well.
That's
So
wild.
I was like, my head just exploded. And that was the first in a series of absolutely crazy synchronicity, coincidence experiences that happened over the coming months. But I still wasn't in any formal recovery. I was still abstinent. But 9 months into this abstinence, we're moving around Australia, traveling, and I start to feel like I'm going crazy. I'm getting restless, irritable, and discontent, although I don't know it. And the desire to fix myself was getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And I actually became kind of like homicidal and suicidal, and was trying to exercise it away. And it just wasn't working. And I rang my dad and told my dad what was going on. And my dad was like, there's somewhere you can go for that. And I knew that it meant 12-step fellowships. And I was like, no way, you're religious and weak. I didn't say that to him, but that's what I thought. And so I managed to ride it out in Australia.
Yeah.
And then we came back to London. We came back to the UK, and we were living in London. And again, long story, but to make it much shorter, I basically hit an emotional rock bottom there in London because I just couldn't manage my emotions anymore. I was like, just done. And I went to my first AA meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And I spoke to my dad that night, and I just said to him, look, I'm going to try one of these AA meetings. I said, I know I don't drink anymore, but I can't stop thinking about having a drink. And if I don't have a drink, I'm going to kill myself. Like, those seem to be the options, really.
Right.
So I went to my first meeting, and without a shadow of a doubt. I mean, that was in 2010, and it was the best decision that I've ever made in my life. You know, without and I knew as soon as I got there, like as soon as I walked into the room and I sat down and I listened to people sharing their experiences, it's just like coming home. It's like, oh my God, finally I found my people. And it was just absolutely amazing, you know. And the whole thing about the synchronicity. So, you know, I don't know if it was early recovery or years later, I can't even really remember, but I remember somebody sharing and saying that Albert Einstein had said that that coincidence is God's way of remaining anonymous. And when they said that, it was another one of those massive light bulb moments. You know, I was thinking like, my higher power's always been there, and the synchronicities and the coincidences and those little pokes on the shoulder just to say, "Hiya, I'm here. You're on the right path. You're doing okay." So that was one of the books. The book I wrote, Anonymous God, was all about those stories, my story and other people's stories. And you asked me the question before we started about the name Ren Koi. So basically, like, you know, I'm five. No, I was 2 years into my recovery, and unfortunately, the wheels of my relationship. I got married as soon as I got into recovery. I married my long-term partner. We'd been together for about 7 years at the time, and you know, in hindsight, it wasn't the right thing to do because our relationship had kind of like, we'd been growing apart for quite some time. But I thought I was doing the right thing by getting married and then hoping that we would stay together. And it wasn't working. I'd come into recovery and kind of going down this path, and she was going, I suppose, down another path. And I take total responsibility for it because it was me that, you know, she wouldn't have left me. Like, I left the relationship, and you know, in hindsight, I really wish that I'd have tried harder because it was basically a case of it being really difficult and me running. Really, that's kind of what it boils down to. But you know, that it is how it is, and the way things have worked out, she's very happy, I'm very happy, so it's all good. But that happened, and I nearly drank at that time because obviously it was a really difficult time. And that was when I really started working the program. You know, my sponsor turned around to me and said, "Look, you know, you don't really have a prayer life. You don't meditate. You don't help people. You know, you're not sponsoring anyone. You know, do you take inventory? Like all these things that now are a staple in my life." So it really turned me on my head, and I started to implement all the, you know, the suggestions, and my life changed for the better. And as a result of doing all those things, I left the sales career that I hated, and I got into a helping career. So I started to retrain and be a drug and alcohol counsellor. I worked in prisons for a few years as a counsellor, and then I got a promotion to a team leader, which is what I do now. So I work in the community and in the drug and alcohol, substance misuse field. But around that time, I started to write these books, and because I try to take the, you know, I'm a traditionalist when it comes to the fellowships, as much as I can be. So I was trying to adhere to, is it tradition 11 or 12, the anonymous at the level of press, radio, and films. So
I think
the
that's
name,
11. I'm going to say 11. I don't know.
11. Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, but I was trying to adhere to that. So I thought, I don't want to use my real name.
Oh, I see.
So that was why I started to use a pseudonym. And the Ren is a tattoo that I've got on my, I don't know if you can see that, yeah, on my shoulder there. And the Koi is another tattoo that I've got on my back.
I see.
So the Ren means clean in Swedish, and it also means love in Japanese.
Okay.
And the Koi is the symbol of courage in Buddhism.
Okay.
So that was how I came up with that name. And yeah, I started writing these books, and then it's just, you know, that was, when was that? 2015. So from 2015 to now, everything really has been about recovery. In terms of, I've been writing the books, I've been recording the podcast, I've been working in the substance misuse field. In terms of my relationship, my partner's now involved in kind of like the recovery kind of world. And we've got a daughter together. We're engaged. We were supposed to get married on the 4th of July in 2020, but obviously COVID scuppered that. So we're now due to get married next year in May.
Yeah.
And my life, when they say in recovery, they say that it's a life beyond your wildest dreams.
Yeah.
Well, what I always say about that is, as I say that, you know, everything that I dreamt about, that I thought that I wanted in my life, I don't have. But everything that I've got in my life is far better than I could have ever imagined.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of the wildest dreams part. I never expected that, as an example, being a stepdad would be so rewarding. Like, I always thought that I was the type of person that could never love anybody else's kids.
Yeah.
And actually, when I fell in love with my partner and became part of, this family, I also fell in love with the kids as well. They are as much, I love them as much as I do my own child, my own daughter. And I
Mm-hmm.
think about them just as much, like throughout the day, I might think about my daughter, but I also think about my stepkids as well. And so that's amazing. And I've really worked hard on my relationship, like with my parents, and friends, and as time goes by, I just try my best to. I mean, I know in my own mind how selfish I am. Like, literally, from the moment I wake up in the morning, I'll think about myself all day long. Like, that's what I do. So I now have the tools to be able to put things in place that
Yeah.
mean that I think about other people. And it's just a glorious life. Like, I was walking the dog earlier, and I walk. There's a big kind of like common area, canal, and beautiful woodland all around at the back of my house. And whenever I'm walking, I always like stop and just think to myself, like, God, like, this is just so great. The
Yeah.
fact that I don't want anything more than this.
Yeah.
You know, like, I don't need, like, there's, every now and then I get obsessed with something. Like, over the whole kind of COVID thing, I got back into the music. So I haven't DJ'd for God knows 6 years, 7 years, and because I was bored out of my mind and I couldn't go anywhere, I've bought a new set of decks. I've got like loads of new music on my computer. Like, it was all, I was becoming obsessed with it again.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I can't do anything for fun. So I'm like, right, I'm gonna I'm gonna write an album. I'm gonna start DJing again. I'm gonna be DJing all the radio stations. All that stuff, and I can laugh at it because, don't get me wrong, I would absolutely love to write a track that loads of people enjoyed listening to and got airplay on the radio and stuff. That would be fantastic. But if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. It's
Right.
not, you know, it's not a thing anymore. Whereas in the past, it was like, this has got to happen.
Yeah. I hear you. I hear you. Yeah. Black and white thinking is kind of your specialty, right? Like all or nothing, right? Is the way to go. I When you described thank you for your story.
Thank you.
When you described that, all the things that I thought I wanted, um, what strikes me is that so often we think we want these things to happen because it's going to give us feelings, right, of contentment, joy, success, and yet, when you let that attachment to those things go, you can find those feelings over here, right, through spirituality. And so you've got everything you want and more, just wasn't the way you thought.
Yeah.
So cool. And so Ren Koi is your pen name
Yeah.
for books that you've published.
Yeah, for the books that I've published, and I've got a book coming out this year that's actually, so all the books, the 4 or 5 books that I wrote, I self-published those,
Yes.
and then I made it a goal. So at the beginning of, was it last year or this year? I'm trying to think now. I think it was the beginning of last year, or halfway through last year. I started working with a life coach,
Mm-hmm.
and he was somebody that I had on my podcast, and then we started working together. And I said to him, look, my main goal is I want to get a book published. So I did, basically. I worked with him. I finished this book, and then I worked with him to help me to find a publisher. So that book, which is called All Is One: The Science and Spirituality of Consciousness,
Mm-hmm.
will be out hopefully this year. Well, it'll definitely be out this year, but I'm not sure when.
Got it.
And that is like actually published, so that's like a huge achievement for me.
That's
You
a
know, like
big deal.
yeah.
And so is your name on that?
No, that was under the Ren. That was the last book that I've done under
Okay.
Ren Koi. So anything that I do in the future, I'll be doing under my own name. But yeah, I mean that book. Well, I wrote it in about 6 months actually. So it was like in the first half of 2020, and it was great. It was just like a real deep dive into what spirituality has to say about consciousness and what science has to say, and then comparing and contrasting the two things. And ultimately, you know, like that's where I stand on the whole spirituality thing, and when it comes to religion and spirituality, is like I just see that the whole universe is just consciousness manifesting itself as what we experience.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, like I think that science will one day prove that. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's like what all the mystics have been saying for millennia.
Mm-hmm.
And I think science, yeah, will prove that one day. And it's just a lovely way to live. Like I don't see there being um, good and evil. I don't really believe in that. I just believe that everything is as it is, you know, and like there has to be the opposite of everything.
Yep.
And I just believe in total. But I believe that the universe is just balanced out, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And it's like the same in me. Like I have good and bad in me, and there's no getting. I can't delete all the negatives.
Mm-hmm.
Just be positive. It just wouldn't work. I think you
Mm-hmm.
just have to learn to accept yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we get into trouble when we start denying
Yeah,
parts of
absolutely.
ourselves, don't we?
Yeah,
I think back to it when you were talking about your story about these, these days where everything was so awesome, like you were using drugs, and it was such a great time of your life. And as you were saying it, like as the words were coming out your mouth, I thought, well, it was great for you because you were high, but I'll bet there was a whole wake of destruction behind you, and as you start to become conscious of that, the change starts happening. Because I remember thinking that when my son was out using, I remember being so scared for him, and my heart was breaking for him because I thought his heart was breaking like mine was. And then I realized, oh, wait a minute, he's actually not suffering right now. I am. It's when he sobers up that he suffers. Um,
yeah, yeah.
so right now he's feeling no pain, and that actually gave me some peace to think of that way. Like, it's like, okay, because it, because of the codependence, right? I suffer if my kids are suffering. So if I can think of them not suffering actively, then I'm like, oh, okay, it's just me now. It's like, oh, that's better.
Well, yeah, like we talked, didn't we, about the codependency on my podcast, and it that after that conversation that we had, it really made me realize how much my mum suffered, you
Yeah,
know, because of my alcoholism. Now, I was nowhere near the level that your kids were putting you through because I was living away.
yeah,
So my mum didn't see it.
yeah,
The only time my mum really saw it was when she came over to see me, and I'd like meet them for a meal, and I'd still be hungover from the night before. So she never really knew
yeah,
how bad it was.
yeah,
But it doesn't matter because she was worried. She
yeah,
was just she was just genuinely worried, and she even like she still suffers with that now. Like I think she still, even though she knows that I'm absolutely fine and that there's nothing to worry about, she does still have that playing in her mind. But it's codependency.
it
That's what it
is.
is. It is, and I like every person whose happiness or whose peace of mind depends on the other person, child, partner, whoever being okay.
Mhm.
Well, that's codependency, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. And there's a lot of people in recovery
Yeah,
from substance abuse that have a lot of codependence, and they just don't realize it. Like, they see their dependence on the substance, but they don't see their dependence on, or their entanglement with others who might be, relapsing or not actively in recovery, and they feel, themselves getting taken out by that too. So it's such a complex thing.
it is. I mean, what my overall conclusion to all of this is that every single person on this planet on a gradient is suffering from what we call the spiritual malady.
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
and that when you really think about it objectively,
Mhm.
it's very obvious, isn't it? Like
Yeah. It's everywhere.
we're, we're all human beings who have difficulty managing our emotions and our mental health.
Mhm.
And this has been completely exacerbated by the pandemic, because now the mental health of people has just gone belly up, basically.
Everything's surfaced.
It has, yeah. So, you got your average person who, under normal circumstances, they're working hard, they've got a family, they've got hobbies, they've got the friends, they go to the pub, they entertain themselves, they never even look at themselves. And they think they don't need to, because they think everything's absolutely fine.
Mhm.
But when the world stopped and they were just left with themselves, all of a sudden, they're
Yeah.
like, holy shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, I don't like, do I like myself? Do I like my life? Do I like my job? Do I like
Yeah.
my partner? Do I like my kids? you know,
And when they do discover that no, they don't, it is like you just said, everything outside of themselves is the problem.
yeah,
And
yeah,
that's
yeah,
the suffering. And
definitely.
I you're right, like I see it everywhere. And I just want to look here because I wrote something down from your book. The 3 stages of addiction. This is in your book Addiction Prevention. The 3 stages of addiction you wrote first starts as an emotional disorder, then a mental illness, then a physical dependence.
Yeah,
And can't you just say that we're all in that boat?
of course. That's the point of the book, is that, if we can all agree that that is basically what addiction is,
Mhm.
then we can all agree on a treatment, can't we? And a treatment is basically to teach kids to manage their emotions.
Yeah. How to feel
And
your feelings.
end of problem. And the thing is,
I
the
know.
thing is that it is that simple. Like, the problem is now you've got people saying, oh well, they've got ADHD, they've
Mhm.
got ADD, they've got this, they've got that. No, hang on a second. They just want to be children and they just can't manage their emotions. And the problem is you can't manage your emotions either. So you can't teach them how to manage their emotions. Hence, we'll give them a load of drugs.
Yeah.
It's just mental. It's absolutely mental. And the problem is, I'm a 40-year-old man and I still can't manage my emotions.
Takes a lot of work, doesn't it? When you're learning as an adult.
And I'm 10 years in recovery and I still reach for things to fix myself. Like, I still reach for shopping. I still reach for sugar,
Me
you
too.
know, whatever,
Me
like,
too. And what holds me back from feeling the feelings is that old fear. I'm not going to be okay if I let them come. Or it means something about me that I don't want to face. Like there's a story that I have that this is challenging and it's not okay. Like what if I really am lazy? Like that kind of fear, like, oh my God, like that's like it's unacceptable. I can't go there, or like it's the fear and the old stories that keep me from like accepting
yeah,
and just letting it come.
yeah. And that's exactly where I am at right now in my recovery. Is I'm trying my best to look at the stuff square in the eye, accept it, ask myself, can I change it? And if I can change it, then let's change it. And if I
Yeah.
can't change it, just accept that that's the way that it is.
Yeah.
Like, it's like I'm starting to go bald. Like, I've got, like, my hair's thinning a little bit. And
Yeah.
someone will take a photograph from the wrong angle, and I'll be like, oh, it's a bit thin there. I have to accept that. Like, I'm getting older. Like, that
Yeah.
is not about the vast majority of my friends have all shaved their heads because they've lost their hair. So it's all that stuff, isn't it? Like, I never used to be able to just be honest about that stuff.
Hmm.
Couldn't. I suppose I was saying this to somebody the other day. Actually, I think I was saying it to my dad or maybe my partner. Like, people throughout my life have always thought I'm a really strong person. Like,
Hmm.
like, it's almost like comments that people have made as if to say, like, well, you don't have any problems, do you? Because you just manage them. It isn't that at all. What it is that, like, I just haven't spoken about them.
Hmm.
I can just move past them.
Hmm.
But moving past them never works.
Hmm.
You have to deal with things. Otherwise, eventually it comes back round. And,
Yeah.
maybe the thing, like, about the music, maybe the music thing is something that I just have to accept, on some level, that Either A, it's got to go and forget about it and move on. That was in the past. Or have fun with it, which is what I'm trying to do now. I'm just trying to have fun with it. I'm not trying to do anything with it. I'm just trying
Yeah.
to have fun and actually enjoy the
Yeah.
process of writing music or mixing music or whatever. So yeah.
And slowing down that compulsion to now I need to spend $1,000 on this because I'm going to go pro. It's like, whoa. What is that? What is that? What is that? What's happening right now?
So funny you just said, because that's exactly what I did a month ago. Spent £1,000 on a DJ equipment.
Yeah.
And then now I'm like, I might sell it.
It's hilarious. I do the same thing. I can get kind of extreme. So we talked a little bit about that tradition of anonymity in 12-step programs, and I've questioned it so much, because at one point I understood the spirit behind it, but it can get taken, it can get distorted, I think, and taken in such a literal way that it's almost like we expect people to be secret about their 12-step work, and I don't know that that's really the intention of, of that tradition. So what's your understanding of that tradition now?
Well, I was convinced by 3 people that came on my podcast to drop my anonymity and use my normal name, and just be open about it, because they convinced me with a few words, and all 3 of them said the same thing, which was, you might help more people. That was it. As soon as they said that, I was like, fair enough, yeah. I mean, everybody that's in my life knows that I'm in recovery.
Yeah.
I think the thing is, when it comes to anonymity, what we've got to remember is that tradition was put into place in 1945, when men could not tell people that they were in Alcoholics Anonymous, because they would have lost their jobs. It would have caused issues in their community, etc., etc. And also, it was put in place because they were worried that if somebody said, "Oh, I'm in Alcoholics Anonymous," and then they went and had a drink, that it would suggest to other people that it didn't work, that the program didn't work. So that isn't the case anymore, is it? Like, if you look at people like Russell Brand, for example, or Anthony Hopkins, or any of the huge stars that are in recovery that are fairly open about it, if they went and had a drink tomorrow, you wouldn't straight away think, well, Alcoholics Anonymous doesn't work, they've had a drink. You wouldn't think that. So, I just look at it from that perspective. But at the same time, I do locally, I do try and keep it low key. Like, I don't go around, shouting from the rooftops saying I'm I do this podcast and I write these books and this kind of stuff.
Sure.
If people hear them and people read the books or whatever, and they come and talk to me about it, then that's great. But I'm just trying to, I suppose, I just try and do it all fairly low key, really. Like, again, where do I want to be?
Yep. Yeah, and you don't want to commercialize AA, because it's not meant to be that way, and you certainly don't want to publicize your home group or break anonymity there. So that makes sense to me. But I appreciate the fact that you are, and I see more people talking openly about their journey, which often includes a 12-step fellowship. Yeah. And I think that is like you say, you might reach more people, and you might plant a seed for people like your dad did, with you in the book, which I love that story about you drinking on the beach, reading the book. And you thought that he was sharing with you his journey through the 12 steps. I love it. I just, as an aside too, I think the first Al-Anon meeting I went to, of course, there's the 12 steps, someone's got a mural of the 12 steps and the 12 traditions on the wall. And I remember staring at it and thinking, what's that got to do with us? Oh, I know. I thought that must be so that we know what our alcoholics are supposed to be doing so that we can check up.
That's just gold.
Because it's a reference point for me so that I can now go back and say, what step are you on? Hilarious. I had no clue.
Well, that just, I mean, Al-Anon, I've just found out that there's another fellowship called Emotions Anonymous as well, which I'd never heard of before. and it's actually been going since the 70s. You know, these fellowships, and another fact actually that's at the beginning of that book, Addiction Prevention. There's over 200 self-help 12-step fellowships, and only a small percentage of them are for addictions.
Yeah.
So that tells you everything that you need to know, doesn't it? Really,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
this. The reason why I'm more open about my recovery, and especially about the 12 steps, is because I firmly believe, especially working in the substance misuse field, I firmly believe that it is above all other programs, the one program that will change your life.
Mm.
I really do. And I think that, and I've spoken quite a lot well, not just recently, but like over the last couple of years on the podcast, I've spoken about the use of psychedelic medicines. And the reason why I've spoken about that is because I also believe that one of the major barriers to recovery is having a spiritual experience.
Mm.
Like I think a lot of people, I think if people would have had some sort of spiritual experience before they come into recovery, they'd be much more open
Mm-hmm.
to the concepts.
Yeah.
And that is something that is definitely available through the use of psychedelics, which aren't addictive. So I'm a big advocate for that as well.
Yeah. I actually did an ayahuasca retreat last year.
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
I did 3 years ago. How was yours?
Well, I don't really like hallucinating and I don't really like vomiting. So it was a long 4 days, I have to say, and not something I'm anxious to repeat. However, I do joke, my kids think this is hilarious because I said, well, I did visit the time-space continuum and I can explain how time is both linear and happens all at once. Been there, done that. And they're like, uh-huh. And I'm like, yeah, but it makes perfect sense to me now.
Oh,
I can see it.
please send me an email and explain it to me because I love like, all jokes aside, my partner and I talk about that quite regularly because we believe the same thing.
Yeah.
But we can't figure it out how.
I got a visual for you. I'll actually draw it out for you. I noticed in your book as well, the addiction prevention book, you talk about alcohol as a poison and how odd it is that our whole society talks about how there's a segment of the population for whom, because there's some sort of defect, they just can't drink it.
Yeah.
And for everyone else, it's got all these health benefits.
Yeah. Does it?
But those messages are still out there, right?
Yeah.
That a glass of
Oh,
wine a day reduces the risk of this, and this. That, it's just helping you unwind at the end of the day. It's mommy juice, right? Is wine now. Like, it's really become quite popularized, right? I love you to the liquor store and back was another meme I saw. Like, it makes me think now when I see stuff like that. It's like, oh, okay, so what's going on here? What's happening here? And what does alcohol really do to you?
Yeah.
Do you really understand what's happening? Or are they still in the place where you were, was this is so awesome? Like, when I think back to the times when I overdrank, um, and my compulsion to do it again, it's because it's so fun. But if I really think about it, that really fun feeling was about maybe 10 minutes of the
Yeah.
night.
Yeah.
It was this much time
Yeah.
where the alcohol was hitting me a certain way, and the rest is a write off.
Yeah.
And then so is the next day, and now even the next day. So our memory is so false of what's actually going on. And I think there's a lot of people that are still there with alcohol, thinking they don't realize how disruptive it is to their sleep. They don't realize that it's affecting them the next day. They don't realize that they're spending more money than they've got. All of the things that come with using this very under respected drug.
It is just a drug. It kills more people than heroin
It's
worldwide.
craziness. Yeah.
So what more do you need to know? It kills more people than heroin, the and working in the substance misuse field, I can tell you with absolute certainty that a vast majority of people that die from alcoholic related deaths aren't reported as alcohol related deaths.
Mm,
So it kills way more people than we're actually told. Um,
crazy.
and ultimately, it's just a drug that people use to relax. It's as simple as that. People use it to relax. They think that it makes them have a good time, and they con themselves by saying that it tastes great when it tastes like shit, basically.
Really, what I love. So I don't drink alcohol right now. But what I miss is the ritual around it.
Yeah.
That's what I miss. I don't actually miss the alcohol, but I miss the idea of having a glass of wine on a Friday night. I miss the ritual of shopping for it and the anticipation of having a good time with it.
Yeah.
I don't miss it, and I don't miss the effects of it. It's wild, really. Well, I bought this biometric measurement tool, like it's called a Whoop. I don't know if you've heard of a Whoop, but once you wear that thing and it measures heart rate variability, sleep, recovery, all of that, there's no denying the effects of alcohol because you can see it plain as day, how disruptive it is to your sleep, to your recovery, to everything. It's just crazy.
That is crazy. I'll tell you what's even more crazy, the name Whoop, because a whoop in England is like a cross between a wee and a poo.
They clearly didn't do their marketing on that one. They're
UK for that marketing.
That's hilarious. It's spelled WHOOP.
Yeah.
It's kind of a cool tool, but yeah, that's hilarious. I also, here's something else I loved I wrote down from your book. You start drinking or start using whatever substance or behavior you've got, let's say, to feel good, and then you use it to avoid feeling bad.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. Well, again, it's it's there's somebody that I know quite well that he calls it the bad medicine. That's the way that I look at every single substance and even behavioral addiction. Is it's just medicine, isn't it? Like, you feel shit, you're trying to avoid your feelings, or you feel whatever, whether you're feeling good, whether you're feeling bad, whatever you're feeling, just feeling.
Yeah.
And you're trying to avoid that feeling, and you avoid that feeling by ingesting something or performing an act which will stimulate your dopamine reward pathways.
Yeah.
That's all you're doing. You're just trying to avoid feeling. So it's just medicine, it's just medication. And again, I suppose I find it quite frustrating that not everybody in the world knows this.
Yeah.
Like, we can't even agree.
No.
We can't even agree in this country on a rational definition of addiction. So how can we do it worldwide? But that was the reason, I suppose. In my grandiosity, I was thinking, I'll write this book, and then one day somebody will read it and go, he was right.
But he was right. Remember John?
Yeah.
Remember John?
Remember John, who's called Ren for some reason?
I knew him back when he was Ren.
Yeah.
I think that I think there is a real rising awareness, though, from more. I come across more and more people who are thinking this way, that is complex. It's nature and nurture. That it's a spectrum. That everybody's on it. That you behave any behavior, any substance, can be used in this way. And with neuroplasticity, I mean, you talk about dopamine receptors in your brain. You can change how many receptors you have for any one behavior or substance. It's very pliable, and so you initially you drink and it it's two receptors, let's say, and it feels great, so you develop more receptors for it.
Yeah.
And if you're not hitting them with that alcohol, now without the alcohol you feel bad. Like, it makes perfect sense how that swing happens.
Of course. Yeah.
And then one of the other things that I see, like you talked about being abstinent but not in recovery, initially what I see in me and in other people is that you replace one addiction with another, right? So try and get into a 12-step meeting and get between the fellowship and the coffee pot and look out. Like, that's not a safe place to be, right? Like because we are now looking for caffeine and sugar. Like, that's how we're doing it. And it's okay. It's okay. It's a
Yeah,
journey, right? Less of
yeah,
what makes you feel bad, more of what makes you feel good.
yeah. But that is the tail of the tape, isn't it? Everybody cross addicts onto something. Do you know what I mean? I put the alcohol down in 2010, and then ever since then I've had a sugar addiction.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm currently about I think about 2 months off chocolate completely because I recognised that chocolate was like the one thing that I was binging on it and it was causing me the problems. But I put that down, and then my ice cream intake has escalated, my crisp intake has escalated, and it's just there's always something, and ultimately all it boils down to is like what we said before is I'm getting progressively better at sitting with myself. Like today I've not eaten any sugar whatsoever because today I said to myself this morning, just for today I'm not going to have any. And and I've followed a kind of a meal plan, I suppose. I knew what I was going to have for my meals. I've had my meals. I won't eat any sugar now between now and when I go to bed. But doing that every day, it's really, really difficult. It's really, really, really tough. And I actually joined OA, the 12-step fellowship for food, and it did work. That's the only time I've ever been completely abstinent from sugar for about I think 3 months. But it was just like I didn't quite gel with the meetings, and
Mm-hmm.
um, it was all me. It was nothing to do with the meetings, and unfortunately, I kind of left. But I might go back, because it works, and the whole point of writing that first book was to say that the 12 steps will work on any addiction. If you've got an addiction, or if you've got any emotional issues, behavioral issues, whatever, and you want help, for me personally, I believe that is your best option.
I don't disagree with you. There is an interesting book that's worth a look. Um, Made me think actually quite a bit about the 12-step fellowship, and also I think I mentioned this when I was on your podcast as well. My definition of recovery, abstinence, uh, relapse, and it's called Quit Like a Woman or Quit Like a Girl. I can't remember which one it is, but it's interesting really what she's saying in about the 12 steps. She's quite hard on the 12-step fellowship. I think she's maybe missed some of the point of it. She's she's quite hard on it. A lot of it, the reason that she's so hard on it is that it is written in old language, started in the 30s and 40s, and is really geared towards men,
White middle-aged men.
white middle-aged men who could probably especially then use some ego deflation. The rest of us, we're well acquainted with ego deflation. Thanks very much. We don't need so much of that, So that's her argument, and it's not, she makes a point. It makes a point worth thinking about. But there's a lot of other stuff in there about the effects of alcohol and the definition of relapse and recovery that are, I think you would fully support. Like she makes some interesting points, and it's worth looking at anyway. I forget her name.
I
Anyway,
agree with everybody's opinion that's got like I mean I'm not a fundamentalist.
no.
So I agree with what the way I look at it is everybody's got their own view of it. Like everybody's got their own perception of what could be changed. Like why did they have to use the word God? Why couldn't they just use higher power?
Mm-hmm.
There's loads of things in recovery that I don't like personally.
Yeah.
But the one thing that I can't get away from is the fact that program, if you sit down with somebody and this is something that I've been banging this drum actually recently in meetings. Loads of people have been coming into recovery recently. Well, over the last 10 years, actually, I've seen loads of people come and go, come and go. And,
Mm-hmm.
you don't know whether they're dead. You don't know whether they're still drinking. Who knows? But the common denominator is they don't take the steps. That's the
Mm-hmm.
common denominator. Yeah. So I've been saying to people, this is the best analogy that I can give you. It's like taking an exam. Yeah. You go home, you revise for the exam, you learn everything that you need to know about it. You don't then just sit in your bedroom and think about it, or even just talk to your partner about it. You go to the hall, you take the exam, and then afterwards you talk about it. And it's the same with the step, isn't it? With the
Yep.
steps, isn't it? Like
Yep.
somebody takes you, like you take those steps, and the only difference being that, you know, there's a pass and a fail. The fail is that you don't take the step, and the pass is you take the step. It's as simple as that.
Exactly.
You know, as long
Yeah.
as you do it, you've passed.
Yeah, and there's going to be something of value for you in there.
100%.
Guaranteed.
Guaranteed. Like there's, and the fact is that they weren't lying when they wrote in the book that if you take the steps, you will have a spiritual awakening. Like that will happen. There will definitely be a psychic change that will happen. You know, and once you've had that change, I'm not then saying that, you know, that you need to stick with the 12-step fellowships. I'm not saying that you need to do anything. All I'm saying is that, like, if you take those steps and then you incorporate those principles into your life will get better.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. That is unarguable. For sure. But like everything, when it becomes hard work, I'm going to find 1,001 reasons why it's not for me.
and all those people will say, well, it doesn't work.
Oh, yeah.
It didn't work for me. Well, did you take them? Did you take them all? No.
Yeah. Well, I wanted help, but not that much. Yeah. That's true.
Yeah,
it's true.
You know, like, and the thing is, Maureen, there's like you said, you've done an ayahuasca retreat. You know how hard that is. Like I've done one, and it is very, very tough. Like very
it's a
tough.
lot. Yeah.
It really is. You know, and there's loads of different paths. There's 12 steps. There's ayahuasca. There's, you know, there's years of counselling, psychotherapy, whatever it is that you want to do.
Yeah.
It's hard. Like there's no easy way out of this. Like if you've got problems and you want to solve those problems, you need to do some work. You know,
it's going to be unpleasant. You're going to have unpleasant feelings at some point. Yeah.
Yeah. And then it circles back to the whole, the solution to not feeling those feelings is medicating them. We've done that.
You know, and there's so much, like we said earlier. I know I said I promised I would wrap this up, and I will. I promise I will. But when COVID started, I was starting to dig into some unpleasant things, and I thought this is the perfect opportunity. Right? I've got nothing but time, and time alone. And so I actually became quite obsessed with a show called Alone, and I just couldn't. I was like this. I was watching it like this, like what's happening to these people? Because what they do is they drop these people by themselves in the remote wilderness. They're all survival experts, right? So they know how to look. They know how to live. They know how to do the things that keep them alive. But what took them out was their mind every time. They couldn't handle being alone, and they had to film themselves. They had all this camera equipment. They had to create a documentary of themselves. And the way people rationalized quitting was fascinating. And I was glued because as I was coming to this whole idea that, man, time with yourself and how you feel is the battle. Like that's what we're all kind of up against here.
Yeah, definitely.
And
definitely.
so it was an interesting time.
With that program, definitely.
What's that?
I said I'd enjoy that program, definitely.
It's good. You could get it on, you can buy it on iTunes and you can download it. Like it's worth a look. It's a good one. Man, the mental.
Sorry, I was going to say, what came out of it for you? Like what have you had to overcome then?
It was, I think, really cementing for me that if we don't learn to sit with how we feel, we will always find something. Like it just crystallized it for me. It was like, I'd been suspecting, this for a while, and here it is, just illustrated episode after episode after episode. And watching people, like I say, rationalize, like they couldn't admit it. They couldn't say, man, my own thoughts are driving me crazy. Some very minor number of people could do it, but most people were, you know what, family matters more than the money. I'm going to go home. And I'm like, it's about a distraction. You need a distraction. That's what you can't handle how you're feeling.
Yeah.
Your family's fine. You know, they'd be like, my 1-year-old's having her first birthday. How can I miss it? I'm like, your 1-year-old doesn't know. Like, it's not about your 1-year-old. It's about you. Like, it's so, it just was over and over and over again. So that's what I took away from it.
Yeah, well, I'll never forget. I read in a book, Osho. The guy who used to be Rajneesh, and he's now called Osho, or he was dead. He's dead years. But if you Google Osho, Osho,
Okay.
he's a very controversial but famous mystic, spiritual man. And
Okay.
actually, you need to check out what's it called? Wild Wild Country on Netflix.
Okay.
It will blow your mind.
Okay.
So Osho and Rajneesh are the same person, and you'll see what. Anyway, that's a different story. But one of the things that he used to say was, as soon as you get a feeling, close the door and sit down in meditation.
Ah,
And that just always used to play on my mind. And that's exactly what you're talking about there. And I went and did a 10-day silent meditation retreat in 2018, and it was unbelievable. Like your mind, once you've been in silence for 2 or 3 days, well, every day it gets louder and louder and louder and louder and louder and louder. The amplification of your thoughts is just crazy. But then I think it was about, I don't know, maybe halfway through, fifth or sixth day, it just went, like it disappeared. And oh my god, the serenity that you
really?
experience once your mind switches off, it's it's just, well, I mean, I understand now why people go and meditate in caves, and and all that stuff, and go into the forest and just disappear and go and meditate and be on their own, because it's that they're wanting to achieve. It's that total blank mind, that place where like Buddhist monks can achieve that, can't they? Just like, just
Mm.
get straight to it. Yeah, it's unbelievable. No mind, they call it.
Okay. I'm going to check that out because that's always been I thought a lot about silent retreats. And I'm like, I know I'd go crazy. I can't meditate for 2 minutes for the love of God. I'm just crazy. Crazy. So
That's,
what,
that's okay though. That's how it's supposed to be. I mean,
that's where I am.
people say that to me all the time. Say I can't meditate because my mind doesn't stop going. It's like, well, no, that's everybody's mind is that way.
Yeah.
And all you need to do is observe the thoughts. That's all you got to do. You got to try and sit and observe the thoughts, and then
Yeah.
not be attached to them, which is very, very difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, gets better with practice, I would
But it's just
imagine.
practice, isn't it? It's just practice. I mean, I've been meditating since 2014, and I was in 2014. I could not sit down for any longer than 2 minutes. I put my timer on for 2 minutes, and I couldn't last.
So I know.
And then by 2018, I could do an hour,
Yeah.
and now I can't do longer than 15 minutes again, because I'm out of the like out of practice,
Yeah.
and I've not been doing it as much. I've gone back to being crap.
But even though I'm crap at it, like you say, and my mind's racing, and I'm like, oh well, that wasn't great. I still feel better
Me too, 100%.
afterwards. So yeah.
Always.
So what did you learn in your ayahuasca retreat?
Oh well, I went there with specific questions, or like specific reasons to be there. One of which was whether my partner and I should be together, because we'd separated, and we were thinking about kind of getting back together, and that question was answered. I also had this deep seated belief that nobody really loved me.
Mm,
There was like, I always felt as though people were just kind of tolerating me, and nobody really cared, and that kind of stuff. And
mhm.
that was eradicated. And also, I wanted to, to try to not be as selfish a person. And Mother Ayahuasca laughed at me and told me to just be altruistic. Selfishness is a decision, basically.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And then the final one was I arrogantly and egotistically wanted to meet God, and I was given that experience. I became one with my creator, and that was where the All Is One title of my book came from.
Lovely. That's
Uh,
awesome.
yeah, it was. I went into the oneness, and was in the oneness for, well, I disappeared completely. Like, I had no experience of myself anymore. And then when I came out of it, I kind of had this, like knowing that that's what all the mystics have been talking about, that all is one, and everything's just consciousness.
Yeah.
So it was quite profound.
That
And
is,
then
yeah.
afterwards, sorry, my alarm's going off my phone. Afterwards, I was telling this to the guys that were, running the retreat, and they were like, "Don't get carried away. Everybody gets carried away. Everybody thinks that the resurrection." And I was like, "No." I was like, "I know. I've seen it."
Yeah. That's awesome.
You know what? The first thing that I did, Maureen, when the retreat ended, which was beautiful, and if you want to read this, one of the books I wrote was called "Together an Ayahuasca Experience."
Okay.
I'll send these books to you if you want. I'll send them in PDF form. But that is the story of my ayahuasca experience, and the most beautiful thing happened at the end of it. So when the retreat finished, the cooks brought a load of food into the tent for us to have to eat, and I just got into the middle of the room and I started serving everybody. And that was really different for me, because normally I'd be the first person at the front of the queue to get served. And I sat back and I just started feeding everybody. And then once everybody else had eaten, then I started eating. And this woman came up to me and she just said, "That is the nicest thing anyone's ever done for me." And I said, "Why? What do you mean?" I said, "I was just giving a bit of food out." And she said, "Yeah, but I'm usually the server and you served me first." And I was like, "Wow, that is magic." That is what I'd been asking for, to be the server. And that's kind of like the metaphor for my life really is to be I want to be of service to people, because I'm an only child. I'm a spoiled brat, basically, who always puts himself first.
Yeah.
And now God has landed me in this position of my life where I'm like surrounded by 2 stepkids, a 1-year-old daughter, a dog, a partner, parents, and they all need me to be of service to them.
Yes.
And that's a beautiful thing, that's what I feel blessed with.
How awesome is that? That's pretty cool.
Well, the universe never gives you what you want; it gives you what you need.
Yeah.
And what I need personally, and I think everybody needs it to some degree, is I need my ego to be smashed. It's like once the ego is smashed, then it gives way for the spirit, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's true.
Broken open.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So your new book is called All Is One.
All is one. Yeah.
Okay.
The science and spirituality of consciousness.
And that book, I'm sure, will be announced and available through your website, which I'll have in the show notes.
Yep.
And also the books that you've talked about and that I've mentioned that are under your pen name are also, available on your website as well. So fear not. Yeah.
They're all free. Every one of my books, you can go to my website and you can download the PDF for free.
That's awesome.
Well, my new one, I want to make some money.
Yeah, I hear you, man. It's not writing books is not a money-making venture, I gotta say.
I mean, to be honest with you, that is actually not true. I don't care about money one iota. I genuinely don't. I have enough money to live my life.
Yeah.
And if I don't make any money out of this book, I don't care. The only thing I wanted to do was I wanted to achieve getting published.
Yeah.
And I just hope that anybody that reads it just gets something out of it.
Yeah.
I enjoyed writing it.
Yeah, that is the key. Is that it reaches the people that need to have it. So good for you. Well, thanks so much for coming on today and spending an hour and a half chatting with me. Man, that's very generous of you. And I'm sure we'll cross paths again, because I feel like
definitely. Yeah.
we'll just chat forever, honestly.
Yeah, cool. We'll stay in touch 100%. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Thanks. Have a good day.
You too. Thank you.
Bye. Friends, thanks for listening. And if you liked this episode, please be sure to click on the thumbs up below for YouTube and comment. What did you like most? And what do you want to hear more of? I'd love to hear from you. And in case you missed it, the website is maureenTowns.com. Bye.